Show you the image upside down because to make it clear how the situation actually is. And this is then the real thing. And of course the Indian Ocean is south of the peninsula, and the river, which was also shown in the carvings, is floating, streaming in the sea from the northeast. Now I show you three details, and they may, well, be contribute to the dating of this cabinet. At the left you see an image of those hillocks, and on the hillock you see an emblem of a sun. Here in more detail, and that's the emblem of the King of Kandy, who helped with his army to oust the Portuguese from Mathura. And I suppose this emblem refers to it, so I proposed that it was made shortly after 1640, when the Dutch and the Canadian army ousted the Portuguese. You may doubt it a little bit because of the wear of the gentlemen at the right. They wear large brimmed heads like the Portuguese are usually portrayed with, but you know, it was also a kind of a type of say the red barbarian, the European, to depict those. Now, a similar casket is, here it is. Yes, at the right there is the Berlin casket that's preserved in Berlin in a museum, and from these two examples you can suppose that this was really made for the export in some numbers. But probably to Amsterdam, because Amsterdam had taken over Lisbon's role as a center in trading luxury goods from Asia. I date actually most of the carvings, the cabinets with piece carvings in the 6040s, 6050s, perhaps 6060s, but that's it. However, other types of carvings remained to be made till 1700. So we have to remember 1543 till 1545 cabinets, caskets under Portuguese patronage, and then about 1604 and some later patronage, Portuguese patronage at the end of the 16th century, but not that luxuriously executed. And from the 1640s onwards till 1700, under Dutch patronage made caskets. The next image is of a Sri Lankan cabinet in the Kunstkamera in Russia, and I consider this as a late 17th century one, mostly because of the inclusion of these arches. The Narilata Vela motif, which is prominently rendered on the sides of the cabinets, I don't seem to have a slide of the side, is typical for the... I do, yes. This is a side for the Kenyan period between about 1600 and 1800. It remained virtually unchanged over the time. This is the Kunstkamera cabinet, which I date late 17th century, and that little casket from the Rijksmuseum, on which you see it as well, on the lid, which I date some well, 6 years earlier. From the mid-18th century, it's a door in relief vihara, ivory carved door in central Sri Lanka, in the Kandy area, and you see the same motif, but that's the continuity of the motif, and a box for preserving Ola manuscripts is preserved in that same monastery, probably also mid-18th century, and see a detail on the right with the same iconography. Now, all cabinets of the Gaul Matra group consist of a wooden carcass veneered with ivory panels, and the key plates are by far not that luxuriously executed as the earlier ones from Coveted. They are no more of gold, there are no more gems incorporated, they are made of plain or engraved silver. Now, I promised to discuss some ivory carvings which were made in northern Sri Lanka in the Jaffna area. And we know about them, of their making, because of a 17th century observation by Philip Baldeus, an employee of the Dutch East India Company, and a Protestant minister in Jaffna from the mid-17th century, from actually 1658, the year in which the Dutch wrested the control of the city from the Portuguese, until 1665. Now, in his book about South India and Sri Lanka, he wrote about the presence of artful workmen in ivory and ebony in the Jaffna region. Now, because Jaffna was the company's most northern, most important center in the north, and situated outside the territories of Kandy, we may assume that the artful workmen produced ivory for a Dutch clientele, which I wonder for Kandy, as I told you. The more since Baldeus noted with regard to silver and goldsmiths that these came to work in the houses of the Dutchmen in Jaffna. Now, his observation probably concerned Tamil artisans, as Tamils made and still make up the greater part of the population of the Jaffna region since long, working in various professions. Now, this is one of a group of cabinets which I consider to be made in Jaffna. The designs consist of symmetrically arranged, arranged stalks of flowers, often placed in a pot. Well, you can't see that. You better believe me. Oh, the pot is central here. Here's the pot. And these caskets, and these caskets consist of a wooden carcass veneered with ivory plaques. My hypothesis is that in in Jaffna, no pierced carvings were made, but we are not certain. This is a blurred image of a cabinet in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and a little bit better image of a detail of it. Yes. And this to the left, a panel preserved in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and which is interesting. This is a panel of a Ebony Cabinet, and this is considered to be made in South India. Now, among scholars, there's quite a debate: is it South India or Sri Lankan? I often don't know, but as it stands now, this panel is, or rather this cabinet which you see now in total, it's preserved, as you can see, in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It's considered as South Indian, and there is quite a relation between the carvings. Now this is a rather crudely executed ivory carving. It is a cabinet in a, oh yes, it was auctioned in Sweden a year ago or so. And it is presumably originated from Gottorf in northern Germany, from the Kunstkammer over there. But the outside is of ebony and the inside panels are of ivory. Incidentally, there are more such cabinets outside ebony paneling, inside ivory paneling. And I suppose these are also made in Jaffna. But there are also cabinets with ebony panels, both on the inside and the outside, which are made in Sri Lanka with similar carvings. I actually assume that both the ivory carvers and the ebony carvers were one of the same person. Now, the execution of the pipe case, no, this is not a pipe case. This is another cabinet which is considered actually as made in Jaffna. It is in another museum in Holland. Now we come to the pipe cases. Well, I think I saw the most beautiful one, just honestly, I'm telling you this, here in this museum, and you see that on the right. It is a rather recent acquisition, I think, splendidly carved with a lion on top, pierce carvings, so I suggest Matrago. However, another one on top with a pipe smoking Dutchman on the top, which you can't see in the Rijksmuseum, but that may originate from Matrago region. Sorry, I'm mistaken. The two pierced ones, among which the one in your museum, I consider to be made in the south, and the one on top in the Rijksmuseum in the north. Sorry. Now we come to other carvings which I consider as made in the north, in Jaffna. I show you here on the top, on the left, that's again in the Rijksmuseum, and there are more such caskets preserved. This one is in the Victorian Albert Museum to the right, and I think the last one is in the British Museum, right. And curiously enough, you see two rampant lions on the lower one on the screen, which gives the impression of being of holding a shield, like on memorials in Europe. They do hold the screen, but it's hidden behind a lock. Now I come to my last topic, and I rather shoot an hour, is it? Oh, I rush through it. These are the Adam and Eve cabinets. I will read it, so I will talk faster. Adam and Eve in paradise, while surrendering to the temptations of the devil, personified by a snake, by accepting an apple from this Satan, ignoring God's warnings. Now, I hesitate to propose a place of manufacture, possibly Mother and Go, but I just don't know. I have some reasons to believe Mother or Go, to which I will come back later. Now, there are at least a dozen of such cabinets known. This is one in the Louvre. This is actually a panel which you can see seen more clearly in the British Museum. And you can see the scene is derived from European engraving, but we haven't found the proper engraving. One of Spranger and one of Holtjes come very clear to it. Actually, Holtjes, of course, a Dutch engraver, looked very closely to Spranger, but it's certainly from a Dutch, or yeah, let's say Dutch engraver. Now, aha. Now, the story of Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit and their consequent expulsion from paradise was particularly relevant for Protestants in Europe, since they considered that every individual who was born after Adam and Eve had inherited their sin, the so-called original sin being one of the dogmas. Now, during the Protestant Reformation, when the Roman Catholic belief was challenged, many Dutch citizens chose for Protestantism. It's conceivable that an Amsterdam entrepreneur had cabinets made in Sri Lanka with images of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, of which he might expect that they would be appreciated by Dutch Protestant collectors. However, there may have been also another reason, and it was your director, Mr. Chung, who first proposed this idea. Yes, you did. That's the veneration of Adam and Eve in Sri Lanka. Now, there is Mulgiril, I always pronounce it wrongly, Mulgiria Mountain, northeast of Mathura. And this was supposed to be paradise or the place of burial of Adam and Eve. And it was named Adam's Hill. Don't confuse it with Adam's Mountain, that's another thing. By the end of the century, Nicolaas Witsen, scholar, scientist, and burgomaster of Amsterdam, was highly interested in these legends about Adam and Eve having lived in Sri Lanka. And he received information about a rock temple in Morigirigala from Willem Konijn, who was appointed minister in 1704 in the Dutch Protestant church in Gaul, well, very close by, really. And he made drawings of the rock temple, and he sent them to Nicolaas Witsen. Well, these are sent later, but he was already appointed there as minister and as informant and paid by Nicolaas Witsen early in the century. And here you see Adam and Eve, the supposed Adam and Eve and their children, which are of course Buddhist sculptures, but anyway, scholars like, well, in Holland thought differently about them. As for their dating, in 1716, Tsar Peter the Great of Russia bought such an Adam and Eve cabinet in Amsterdam. I made this picture not in Russia,